Larry and Joan have been married for 65 years, and one day, it's all over. Or is it? After choking on a pretzel, Larry wakes up on a train to eternity. His AC, Anna, explains everything. She's his afterlife coordinator, and she's going to help him pick his eternity. But his whole life was spent trying to make Joan happy, so he wants it to be perfect for her. When Joan shows up, however, her first husband, Luke, has been waiting 67 years for her. You see, once you choose an eternity, that's it. There are no refunds and no outside visits. Joan now has to choose between a marriage of 65 years and 67 years of longing. Starring Elizabeth Olsen, Miles Teller, and Callum Turner, director David Frain and A24 present Eternity. It's just forever, no pressure.
Welcome to the Burnt or Buttered podcast, where we discuss movies.
I'm Toast.
And I'm Stetson. And today we're talking about
Eternity.
And I feel like this is going to be a pretty short podcast.
Yeah. Here's the thing with this movie. The premise is interesting, you know? And as a short film, I think it would be really fun.
Yeah. The whole time you're constantly thinking, like, what would I do? Or what's more valid? You know, like 67 years of living with somebody, life with somebody, or the idea that you missed out on 67 years with somebody else and they waited 67 years to see you.
Dude was a war hero and decided to be a bartender for 60 years.
Let's not go crazy here. We have no idea how he died in the war. we don't know if he was a hero or if he just died.
I don't know. But Veterans Day was Monday, and so I just want to say thank you to all of our troops, and thank you for your service. Whichever conflict you were involved in or not involved in.
Yeah. It doesn't matter which war it was. I mean, he died in war.
It is a funny bit that they keep on bringing up because the Korean War, I mean, the veterans from the Korean War did get that reaction a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and they were honestly like persecuted a little bit.
Well, you have the veterans from the Vietnam War.
Same.
Like my grandpa that literally came home to people like spitting on him and screaming at him, telling him that he's a baby murderer.
Right.
And like everything else is just insane.
Yeah.
And we just talked about in our last podcast about like the leadership and like going and doing things for people because they say so. You know, it's an interesting thought process. But yeah, coming back to Eternity.
One thing before we get too far into it that we should say is this movie's not out yet.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
We saw this as a Monday mystery movie at Regal.
And it's probably the only reason why we saw it.
I think I was planning on seeing it. Like I said, the premise is an interesting idea.
I mean, Miles Teller always gets me.
Elizabeth Olsen.
Nah.
Could have me.
I will say Elizabeth Olsen's performance in this was really good.
I loved her little accent.
Yeah, and she felt like an old soul in a young body the entire time.
Yeah,
for sure. And that was the interesting dynamic of this movie of when people die, they take the experience of life and go into the eternity, and it kind of feels like they don't get to experience more because you have what's his name?
Luke.
You have Luke that has been waiting 67 years, and for some reason in the afterlife, 67 years is actually 67 years.
Yeah.
That is not like a blink of an eye. Like
but
every
you
day,
don't age.
Yeah.
You're whatever age you were happiest at.
Whatever age you were happiest forever. forever. And time moves the exact same way. So one day on Earth is one day in this this waiting area, whatever they call it. So he did have 67 years of experience in this waiting area. So does that mean that he lived 67 years as well? Or is it not relational because you have him not having a family or a life relationship, but you do see that people do have those in these afterlives. And she's living 67 years of aging, like becoming older and having experiences of becoming old.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't really compare the two, and so it's kind of comes down to the idea of like you have a 60-year-old man dating a 20-year-old woman. They don't like their life experiences are vastly different, and will they even have anything to talk about? And that's something that's explored in here.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like you don't really get a definite answer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. Her character having a hard time with this I feel like is fairly relatable.
Sure.
And like you want to root for Larry, but at the same time you see him doing kind of shady stuff,
Yeah. Well, and I think like with Larry, he's coming from 67 years of loving this person.
Yeah.
Where in that 67 years, romance and like stuff changes, to where all that the fluff and the funness of a relationship changes and morphs into something different.
Yeah.
Where you have Luke, where it seemed like they only had like maybe a few years together. And so all of their relationship was just the most exciting parts of a relationship.
Yeah.
And like you have Larry, who's in actuality 70 something years old or whatever. And he's like, what do I do for fun?
I complain.
Yeah. He complains. And like, even the experience that they have where he's like, I'm going to make you really happy right now. And he's like, just bend down, just bend your knees a little bit.
Just squat.
That's a different level of relatability to a person, than that Luke just would never ever have.
Yeah.
But then you have Larry, kind of towards the end be like, okay, you never got to experience what could have been, so go and experience that. But also it's eternity of experiencing that.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, I'm going to have 67 years experiencing that with this person. I'm going to have forever. Never stopping. It is a crazy premise for sure, and an interesting thought process that I do feel like I went back and forth throughout the movie multiple times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, they do it in a good way where you're not sure who to root for or even what you want out of this situation, The memory tunnels were pretty interesting. Seeing their first meeting stories side by side, kind of, where when she meets Luke, she's the one who's like gaga, right? She can barely get a word out. She's super shy. He's so handsome, and he doesn't really have to do anything other than be handsome, And then Miles Teller, when they meet, she's off-putting, like she doesn't want to talk to him. He's like, you read a lot? I'm a librarian,
Yeah.
And he kind of wins her over. And I thought that was, kind of not only like good for the characters, for the character building, but also foreshadowing, like the substance of the relationship.
Yeah. One thing that I did like as well is like you're going through these memory tunnels and you're seeing like all the good stuff that's happened in their life, but then she goes behind the stage or through the door, and she sees on the other side of all those memories are bad things. And the idea that I think that I got from her running down that hallway and like running towards Larry was like, it's the combination of the two that make a life. You know, like it's not, if she's just in the walkway with Luke and just seeing all these good things, but they never really had bad. The relationship never really had bad besides him dying. Like,
because he's perfect.
yeah. And so as she goes through the door, she's choosing these bad moments in life to be what she wants.
Yeah.
You know, like these hard things that no one ever saw, that no one's ever going to celebrate, that, you know, didn't in the moment felt really impactful, was actually what led to them being in love and living a life that's worth like being together forever, because they have the shared bad sides of life, not just the shared good sides of life.
Yeah, like they know each other well enough to know the bad sides of each other, and they still choose to be together. You know? Yeah, like I said, short film, it would be awesome. No, really, my only critique is just I felt like it was too long.
It was long. My other critique is that it doesn't seem like, to me, there's not that much motivation to go to an eternity. It's like all the, like even the bartender, you know, the ACs coming and helping people pick an eternity or whatnot. It's like they get new stuff all the time. They get to talk to new people. They have new experiences. They have a life that's ever changing. Yes, like everything's kind of fake. They don't see the sky. They, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But they also like get to experience new stuff all the time, where if you go to the eternity, it just feels like you're experiencing the exact same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And like, if it's the most perfect thing that you love, then that's cool. But eventually it's going to get boring. Eventually you're not going to want to be there.
Yeah.
Where if you just don't pick, yes, you have a job, but that job allows you to have variance inside of what happens in your everyday. Even like with freaking Luke being a bartender, he's got stacked this thick of, phone numbers and different people that he met up with throughout the 67 years that he was there. And like, that's a lot of variance. That's a lot of difference, you know? And if you're not even worried about spending eternity with your loved ones, because you're just like, I don't want to spend eternity with my loved one, then why wouldn't you stay?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, they didn't really sell us on the Eternities very well.
No, they seem like they were horrible.
It almost seems like it's just some capitalistic maneuver to force us into, like, they're making it seem so miserable to be in this waiting area that you want to go and pick one of these places, right? But it does seem like all progression stops as soon as you choose one of these Eternities.
Yeah, it's just like, and if you can have a relationship, you can have like a life outside the eternity and like a job, or that's what I would have picked.
Yeah, just keep working for the rest of my eternity.
Yeah, but at least there's different. You know, there's difference there. Like, but I can see, you know, like eventually you'll want to change, because like Luke going into his eternity and being like, oh, that's what the sky looks like. That's like those clouds are moving. Like you would forget that, you know, it ever existed. And you would want to experience something real, but then you're experiencing it forever. And I mean, his eternity was way better than like the beach.
The beach sucked, dude.
Where he has his own cabin. He's up in the woods. There's all these sports that they can do. You know, like I could see that being okay. But all the other type of eternities that they were selling are just like museum land, where that guy was
Casino World. Shut up, dude.
Just like all those aren't big enough for eternity. You know, like and who knows how big his eternity is, but it seemed like there's vast mountains everywhere. Like you could hike forever if you want and never stop discovering things.
Seems like it.
But yeah, the eternity just seemed bad.
Pointless.
But
I'd rather be the void seems like the move to me, man.
Just darkness.
I honestly thought when she when she started going through all this stuff, I thought they were both gonna end up in the void.
Yeah.
And
That's
be like,
that is a question
fine,
that
'cause
I
we're
don't
together.
I didn't really understand at the end when they walk into the behind the doors, and behind the doors is just, I guess you can just be inside of the world that your memories are, because she like crashes through in like a world that she lived in,
Yeah.
type idea. And so is that what they're doing? They're just
Maybe
gonna
they've got
spend-
their like figments of kids there too.
yeah, they're just gonna spend eternity in their neighborhood reliving the same memories that they've already had.
Seems weird to me.
Yeah. That's what I didn't really get at the end, was like they had their own personal eternity that wasn't anywhere else. And is that the void? That's the thing that you're trying to avoid.
Avoid the void.
Who knows?
It does seem like all of the eternities would eventually be hell.
Yeah. And maybe that's the point.
Maybe that's the point.
Maybe you're not supposed to run away from your memories, but go into them.
Go into the memories.
You're supposed to live there forever.
It is A24. I was waiting for a creature to pop out, or like a man to birth another man or something.
You thought that like when she went through the door that she was going to enter into a child's bedroom and capture screams?
I don't know. I thought something was going to happen.
Just turns into Monster Inc. Like.
But it didn't, it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah. For Monday Mystery Movie, I guess it wasn't that bad.
No, I mean, it's an enjoyable movie. Just comparing it to other movies we've seen, it drags a little.
Yeah, that's true. Well, should we put a rating on this thing? You have anything more you want to dive into?
3.
Dang, that was quick.
Yeah, like watching it, I had fun. The characters were fun. The little Easter eggs that you would see, in the kiosks were kind of fun. The guy next to me was loving every single thing that he read on the screen. He would say it out loud.
Influenza.
Whoa. Casino World. I mean,
No way.
great guy. Great guy.
Inflatable Land. What?
Seriously. The whole movie, I was like, maybe I would have enjoyed it more, without the commentary. But I don't know. Maybe 3.
Well, I'm going to rate this a 2.9.
He couldn't do it. He couldn't commit to 2 in a row where we had the same score. He had to. I'm so edgy. I'm so different. I'm Stetson.
All right, 2.98.
Oh, man.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with this movie. There was nothing that like pissed me off. There's nothing that was like, oh, that's dumb. It just was,
It's a fine movie.
It was a fine movie. And I think that there's going to be a certain audience that really connects with this, and loves it and wants to watch it over and over and over again. I probably will never watch it again.
But I might do some research.
Yeah, that's really why Toast thinks this is a 3, because he didn't do all of his research, like watching interviews of all the actors.
Yeah, David Frain didn't make me fall in love with his masterpiece.
It didn't convince him of the magic that he made. But yeah, it was good enough. There was enough Easter eggs that made it, funny. And the thought process of old people being in young bodies is always fun.
Yeah. Which we didn't even mention it. The opening scene actually was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And a lot of character development.
Yeah. And we see it twice. Well, let us know what you guys thought about this one. And let us know if you like these shorter episodes that are, 15 to 20 minutes instead of 30 to 45.
Or vice versa. If you like the longer ones, where I actually have done research, let us know.
All right. We'll see you in the next one.
Pop, pop.